Our political correspondent, Katherine Forster, who's just hopped off the battle bus, or one of the battle buses, or something. They come from somewhere, Katherine.
Where was I? I was in North Wales yesterday, very briefly, and then back here.
Yes, I know. It's stunning, because if you watch the programme, as I did yesterday, you're in one part of the country at the beginning of the programme. By the end of the programme, you're outside Westminster. It's crazy. It must be exhausting.
It's all a bit of a blur, and I was thinking yesterday... one of the visits with the Prime Minister, we were at a farm, he was doling out, as he periodically does, sliced cake with butter to the journalists and the sort of press pack. And 3 weeks earlier, we were in another seat and he was doling out ice cream. But the difference in mood between those 3 weeks, I mean, he's still... obviously trying to be upbeat and positive and bouncy. But, you know, at the beginning of the campaign, even though they were 20 points behind in the polls, they did feel like it was all to play for, that something might turn up, whereas
it really hasn't.
It's hard to see. You know, the gap hasn't moved. They've had several disasters, the D-Day debacle being one of them, then this huge betting scandal that he really didn't want to talk about. You know, it feels like they've had no luck. And, It's very hard for him, isn't it?
I mean, even in the clip we were just playing a second ago, he doesn't sound like he's got it anymore. He does seem quite defeated. I mean, look, I have some sympathy with him. I mean, there's a lot on his shoulders.
Yeah, a lot on his shoulders, and it always astonished me how upbeat he is, and he's still trying, but my goodness, you know, it's been one thing after another. And yesterday, you know, he wanted to talk about the Conservative manifesto for Wales. I have to say, he spent a lot of the time bad-mouthing Labour, basically trying to scare people, saying, look, this is the Labour's record in Wales, don't vote for them, don't give them a blank cheque. He's going to rig it by giving 16, 17-year-olds are going to stay in power for ages. But, you know, this betting scandal, for people that we know of with close links to the PM, under investigation. He was asked by 3 separate journalists in the Q&A afterwards, I was one of them, about this. Why hadn't he at least suspended the candidates? He just does not want to go there. Whether he thinks that if he does, that's going to create more bad headlines. You could argue that if you suspend them, you try to draw a line under it. But, you know, these awkward questions are just not going away, and this is the last thing they need. And who knows, there may be more to come.
If he suspended them, as some of them are candidates, that means you leave a constituency without a Conservative candidate.
Well, sure, but, you know, they're going to lose so many seats, potentially, that, you know, is it worth the political capital? And, you know, there are plenty of precedents for MPs, let alone candidates, sitting MPs, being suspended while investigations are ongoing. He doesn't have to wait for the outcome of the investigations by the Gambling Commission or police to act. This is a choice that he is making. Now, he's obviously got his reasons for doing that. But, you know, on the bus as well, afterwards, we went round and round, all the journalists, on and on and on. And he just
There's a picture
is
of you, actually,
this line.
on the bus. I must say, you all look as though you're enjoying yourselves there.
Oh, it says the Times. That's the Guardian, actually.
Yeah, it's the Guardian.
Yeah, my face looks wider than it does top to bottom. I look quite as fat looking at myself now.
You're on the edge of a wide lens camera. Don't worry about that.
Thank you.
But it just shows you have light moments, but you say the mood is very, very different.
We were joking about the football, and one of the other political correspondents whose knowledge of football is pretty much as bad as mine, so we were teasing him. So, yeah, there are light moments. But overall, you know, the mood as was and the mood now are quite different.
I mean, it's going to be the exact opposite, isn't it, on the Labour battle bus with all of this. However, there are still these issues, and we saw it last night, talking to Christopher Hope. Keir Starmer still facing this issue, and it's daft things, because it's the questions that, you know, are all hypothetical. If your children were very ill and there was a very long waiting list, would you go for private healthcare? It just seems crazy that someone would say, well, if I could find the money, I would do it. But instead of just going, no, absolutely not, no. which won't wash with a lot of people who would just want him to be realistic and normal and like us.
Yeah, that's getting a lot of attention, isn't it? And I think there's a couple of things there. First, when he was put on the spot in that debate, a couple of weeks ago, and he said no, I think that took a lot of people by surprise. And now when Chris Hope, our political editor, pushed him, saying if it was a child, he still said no. I think a lot of people will think that very odd. But I think probably a couple of things going on there. First of all, if having said definitively no, he now goes, oh, well, maybe for my son, daughter, then, of course, we'll get the Mr. Flip-Flop, can't stick to anything, change his mind. And I think the other thing is, what it does show is his personal, very real connection to the NHS, and that his mother, who he clearly adored, was in and out of NHS hospitals throughout her life. And they did take amazing care of her. And he did say, if you are critically ill, the NHS is absolutely the best place to be. And if you're, in a private hospital, often they might send you to the NHS. That's where you get the best care at a critical level.
He's got potentially an easy win if he just says, well, I would like to think I could. But, for the last 14 years, the Tories have brought down the NHS. I mean, you can... It reminds me of my Dennis Healey moment in 1987 when Dennis Healey had made an absolute bean feast of the fact that Margaret Thatcher had had a private hand operation. And he'd absolutely gone for her about that during an election campaign. And then the Sun newspaper found out that Edna Healey had a private operation as well. And Dennis Healey went completely bonkers when I put that to him. But it is one of those moments where private NHS, when do you do it, when do you don't, is obviously still sensitive all these years later.
Yes, and I think obviously if you are the Prime Minister, and Keir Starmer potentially will be 2 weeks from now, I think a lot of people would think if you need treatment, get the treatment, because it might stop you from running the country. But I think also just worth saying that the Shadow Health Secretary, Wes Streeting, he's had cancer himself, and he had a scare recently, and he didn't go private, but he has said, I did think of it if I had to wait a long time. And I think most people would say, fair enough, something, if you think it might be cancer and you can go private, you can understand why he might. But so Keir Starmer was saying, look, I don't have any ideological objection, or I don't judge people who do. But, it's interesting, isn't it?
Oh, yeah.
Quick word about Nigel, because we shouldn't really call him Nigel, should we?
Mr. Farage.
Look, a lot of our viewers this morning saying, look, we agree with what he was saying last night. However, it is controversial.
Well, yes, and he's saying, look, I have been consistent and honest. I've said since the 1990s, when NATO began expanding to the east, that, this is unwise and this is going to be provoking to Russia. The problem for him is, of course, that the nuance of this argument is getting lost, because some people will say, well, look, he's being an apologist for Vladimir Putin. There's no excuse. While Nigel Farage said, of course, it is Putin's fault. But, he's also saying we provoked it. And he also said, I think 10 years ago, Nick Robinson wheeled out some quote that Vladimir Putin was the world leader that he most admired. So I think it is potentially problematic, because although this is a long-held position of his, I think there'll be plenty of people going to vote for reform that maybe haven't heard this before. And of course, reform holds itself up as being very fiercely patriotic. So I think this possibly could come back to bite him with some voters.
You're sort of, it's always the same, isn't it? It's you dyed-in-the-wool reform supporters at the moment won't mind, but it's those people that obviously reform are wanting to win over from other parties.
Yeah, and of course what it's done is it's given the Conservatives and Labour an open goal to have a go at him, because clearly the Conservatives would dearly love to find something which will stick to hurt Reform's poll ratings, which are starting to overtake.
We were sort of noticing, you can't help noticing, that every leader now has an Achilles heel moment, and a sort of question that you can keep nagging them about. Is it the pressure of an election campaign? In the end, this always happens.
I think it is, to be honest. And, they come out with all the sort of positive things that they think they're going to do. And now we seem to be in the phase of, like yesterday in Wales, there was just so much going on the attack, trying to say, don't give Labour your vote because they're going to do this, trying to scare people to the negative campaigning. And Rishi Sunak, the Prime Minister, really hasn't wanted to go there, but I thought it was noticeable yesterday that he really did go on the attack. And he was like, so Keir Starmer was the man that campaigned to make Jeremy Corbyn Prime Minister twice. He was the man that tried to get a second referendum, etc.
But it's interesting. I think it was Alexander Downer, wasn't it, a couple of days ago, who was saying, opposition leader in Australia, Liberal Party leader, which is like our version of the Tories, who said the campaigning has been all wrong for the Conservatives here and they should have just been on the attack from the position they were already in.
Well, certainly there's been plenty of calls for Rishi Sunak to do that. But, a lot of people don't like that. And so many people are so disengaged, disillusioned. I see it wherever I go in the country. So many people just saying they're all the same, and quite a lot of people just saying we're not voting, they're all the same. Whatever they say, they make these promises. And I think the negative campaigning, will turn people off. But it can be very effective. And, the Conservatives putting out messages, nothing seems to have worked. It'll be interesting to see. I suspect we might have quite a few more sort of personal attacks. Yeah.
Oh, we shall see. Katherine, thanks very much indeed.
It is a shame, isn't it, when the politicians get personally attacked. You can't help feeling it gives the wrong feeling to the whole election campaign.
No.
And it provokes a lot of nasty comments as well on social media, and I wish it wasn't like that. Wish we could all be more positive.